Migrants flooded to New York City to avoid Trump deportations, only to get deported from New York City immediately. And they're busting them back to Texas. I don't know if they all came from Texas, but we're about to find out. Cash Jordan.
Fox News is projecting former President Donald Trump has won the 2024 presidential election.
As of now, Fox News projecting Trump currently has 277 electoral college votes.
So, Trump won the election, and that's going to come as a big
Holy
surprise
crap.
to most of New York, which voted 55% in favor of Vice President Harris. But even though Trump won, many progressive policies heavily supported in New York City itself, like liberal immigration laws, go against the platform he got elected on and may govern from. Which means that some really strange things are going to start happening here, especially concerning the...
More strange things, you mean? Because New York, there's already some strange things going on.
the asylum crisis.
Look what happened. Is this crazy?
President-elect Trump
It is crazy.
celebrating victory in the presidential race.
This was about 20 minutes ago. The AP
I was there.
declared Trump the winner over Vice President.
I watched the whole thing for like 12 hours. I streamed. It was a crazy day. Crazy day. I went in thinking it was going to be Kamala slightly ahead, maybe 50-50. And then as it went through the night, I was just, bro, I think Kamala's going to win. And then it went, bro, I think Trump's going to win. Bro, I think Trump's going to win in a landslide. It got to the point where we were debating whether or not he was going to win in a landslide. And he hadn't even been projected to win yet.
Kamala Harris.
The greatest comeback in American political history. I mean, we've never seen anything like this.
With the arrival of more than 200,000.
We really haven't, man. We really haven't seen anything like that. That was bad. How much money did they spend? Like $100,000, $200,000 on a fake Call Her Daddy set? And that's the person that they wanted to run the country. She had no idea what she was doing with money.
Migrants to the Big Apple. New York City has spent more than $5 billion on the migrant crisis.
New York and New Jersey, blue states, how might these election results be felt in our area?
That's the story of the whole election, is that Donald Trump did better in Democratic areas than he did last time around.
A new warning about a dangerous Venezuelan prison gang making deeper inroads in the U.S. The Department of Homeland Security says members of the notorious Tren de Aragua gang are increasingly drawn to sanctuary cities.
I mentioned how President-elect Trump...
I've been hearing leftists, I'm not going to say Democrats, I'm going to say leftists on this one. I've been hearing leftists say, I've been seeing them say that the cartels running the illegals to the country is similar to the Underground Railroad that we had back in the slavery times. And it is 100% not the same thing. These people are not from our country, and the people that are bringing them to our country are not from our country.
Outperformed his 2020 numbers, even in blue areas. Let's put a finer point on that. In 2020, he lost New Jersey by about 16 points. This year, he lost New Jersey by about 5 points.
So I would expect that Democrats are going to continue to try and run to the right. They're going to try and run to the middle, and they're going to try and be the moderate or centrist party. But they've got some work cut out for them, because I think many people tie the Democrats to the far left.
I think it's just going to get worse, too. I think some of them are going to be coming to the middle, some of them are going to stay exactly where they are, and a lot of them are going to go even further to the left. A lot of people in power are going to be going even further to the left.
So Donald Trump has defied the odds and become president of this country once again. But what nobody's talking about is that this totally changes New York City's relationship with our federal government, and it's going to have a massive impact on immigration, but not in the way most people think. Because in many ways, New York City is and remains the focal point of the asylum crisis here in America. And when this crisis first began, Mayor Adams was initially receptive to the idea of thousands of folks coming here to seek a better life. But after thousands came, thousands more.
How you gonna promise a better life for people when the people already living there are living in squalor?
Decided to do the exact same thing, and as of right now, we've got over 212,000 people who've come to New York fleeing poverty, seeking the American dream. And
that's an unimaginable amount of people for me. Probably in my whole part of my state, there's not 200,000 people. Like, whole quadrant. There's 12,000 people in my county, all right? You send that many people over to us, we don't have a county anymore. We don't have multiple counties anymore.
Because of New York City's generous right to shelter rules, everyone's been offered a free place to stay, which is great because it's kept families from having to live out on the street, but it hasn't exactly been sustainable, which is why many of those same families are now being evicted from New York's shelter system. And since that shelter system isn't helping people get jobs, many of these folks are just as homeless now as they were before they moved in, and they certainly haven't achieved the American dream, which was the whole point of this process. But the real reason a Donald Trump presidential victory represents a huge challenge for New York is because
what is the American dream? What do they think the American dream is? What is it? What's the American dream? What is it currently? It used to be basically what Donald Trump is. That was the American dream. We've lost that. Now, what is the American dream? Becoming what I am doing right now, YouTube influencer, kind of failing at. I'm not really. My numbers are way up since when I started, which was 0.
This is still a sanctuary city, and as such, it's going to continue to be a destination, not just for people wishing to emigrate to America, but also for people who want to come here because they can hide from federal immigration authorities. And as you're about to see, New York City could soon become one of the last places in America where folks at odds with our nation's laws will be able to stay. And with pockets of gang activity spreading across our country already, not just in New York, but in other places like Colorado and Texas, there exists the possibility that New York City, with its sanctuary doors wide open, will still see continued migration, not from well-meaning individuals, but from those who have a criminal past and the desire for a crime-filled future. Which is bad news, not just for New Yorkers, but also for the 65,000 asylum seekers still living here. I did the other thing. So here we are, Trump Tower. That's the front entrance. It's about 12 o'clock the day after the election. And it's not too crazy. No protesters, nothing wild, no megaphones, no crowds. But some people here might start doing that once the new president takes over and starts doing things that they disagree with.
New York and New Jersey, blue state.
Oh, 100% it's going to happen. There's going to be riots before Trump even gets into office, I guarantee it. We might even see a leftist January 6th.
How might these election results be felt in our area?
In New York, there's actually a number of congressional seats that seem to have gone from Republican to Democrat. And right now, that's the last chance the Democrats have to hold on to any of the House. They lost the Senate, they lost the presidency. So that could be a big deal nationally.
So according to...
By the way, I'm just going to say this right now. What were all the polls, huh? What were all the polls? They're all just fake. They're all fake. None of them were correct. They were putting Trump and Kamala at 50-50, or Kamala was either was ahead or just, slightly under. And that is not what happened. That is not what happened. Don't listen to the polls. The polls are fake.
To the official results, as a state, New York voted 55% in favor of Vice President Harris. New York is not a state that voted for President Trump. For reference, in 2016, Hillary Clinton won New York State with 59% of the vote, and President Biden outperformed Hillary, winning over 60% of the vote in New York. Which means that even though Donald Trump may have won a stunning victory, and even though this may be one of the greatest political comebacks of all time, he didn't win New York at all. He lost. He lost by just about as much as he always loses. And with
you want to know why? People want to say that it was because of the mail-in ballots. Yeah, sure, mail-in ballots. That was a thing. But you know what a really big issue was? When you put rules and regulations and stipulations on how you have to behave when you go vote, the right wing are not going to go vote. Like, if you make people stand 6 feet apart and wear masks and all that shit, they're not gonna go vote. They'll stay home. They don't want to listen to your bullshit. And that's a big reason why Trump lost. Not just the mail-in ballots. It was that on top of the thing that I just said.
that means is many of the people here do not want Trump laws. They do not want Trump policies. They do not want to see him govern on the platform that he ran upon. That's for sure. And
they actually do want this. They just don't think that they do, because they hear all of the hate breeding, I'm gonna call it. The breeding hate. And they put it into these people's minds and they start to believe it. But they don't realize that putting in these policies is destroying everything. And you can't do it. Once you start letting people do what they want and identify how they want and be as sexual as they want, free expression, man, they start fucking in the streets and start trying to take your kids through indoctrination.
And as a sanctuary city, New York itself already exists in opposition somewhat to federal laws it doesn't like, and it's been doing that for all 4 years of the past presidential administration, which many say is the reason the asylum crisis here looks the way it does. Remember, this all started here back in 2022, and it really started growing in 2023, and we've still got around 65,000 individuals living in our shelter system, which is supposed to be helping them become sufficient, but is failing in that mission because it's not part of a greater purpose of actually connecting these people with jobs and the future many of them were promised when they moved in. Instead, all our shelter system has really provided people with is the opportunity to fill out asylum paperwork and not much else. However, our right to shelter rules, they're not going away anytime soon. Those were not on our recent ballots. That was not something that's been voted on, and even if a new president does come in and close our borders completely, there are still thousands of people in this country right now with legal permission to be here waiting for their asylum cases to play out. And unfortunately, there are also quite a few people in this country that have ties to dangerous criminal organizations. We're talking at...
Yep. Get out of the cities, man. They're just gonna keep getting worse, I think. I don't think cities are supposed to exist. Throughout history, is there a single city that is still standing, that has existed for thousands upon thousands of years? No. They all fall down. You know what doesn't? The rural areas. Unless they get conquered by people in the cities. And then they become cities and then eventually fall apart. Like a cycle. Unless the rural people are strong enough to fight back.
At least 600 known associates of a dangerous Venezuelan gang. Tren de Aragua is the name of it, which started in a prison in that country a few years ago. And that gang is now here. There have been reports of gang members living in some of the city's own funded shelters that are supposed to help asylum seekers, creating a situation here that's not only very bad for the people the asylum crisis is named after, because they can't actually get the help they need or achieve anything if gang members with weapons control where they live and exploit them, but this is also a potential problem for New York because of how popular Donald Trump now is on a national level. He didn't just win an electoral victory, he also won the popular vote. It's very likely that he could govern on what he ran on, and some in New York may see this as an opportunity to oppose that by doubling down on sanctuary-type policies that don't actually help people who really need it.
While we're speaking of New York and New Jersey, are you surprised to see the actual total numbers? Usually these are obviously tried and true blue states.
That's the story of the whole election, is that Donald Trump did better in Democratic areas than he did last time around, and it wasn't an enormous change most of the places. It was 2 or 3 percentage points, but the race and the electorate is so divided that that's all.
So the key word, unfortunately, here is division. New York is very divided from how many states and many voters feel about our upcoming new president, and that's probably only going to become even more apparent as 2025.
He says states. What he means is cities. Because the states are mostly red still.
Rolls around and he takes office for the second time. And even though the asylum crisis as a whole may change with less people entering the country through ports of entry or through the borders, it is ridiculous to think that cities like New York with progressive leaders won't rise up in opposition to that in some way, potentially passing policies that don't exactly make the asylum crisis better, even though they claim to. Like our right to shelter policy, which doesn't actually help people. Yes, it lets you move into a former hotel or into one of the gigantic tents out on Randall's Island, but it just does that. It's not actually helping people get on their feet and achieve the American dream, yet it exists, and it's something Republicans complain about, so maybe more of that will keep happening, even though it's not actually benefiting the very people who move into those shelters. Again, these are dangerous environments in many cases. Police are banned from going inside of them because this is a sanctuary city, so our local law enforcement that has plenty of resources to...
Wait, is that a thing? That police are banned from going into areas full of asylum seekers? Why? Obviously, there's going to be crime in these areas. There should be police going in there and enforcing our laws. Like, what? Actually, I don't even know what a sanctuary city is. Does anybody even know? I'm gonna ask. What is a sanctuary city?
According to Wikipedia, a sanctuary city is a municipality that limits or denies its cooperation with the national government using immigration law. The city's council and mayor usually declare itself a sanctuary city and subsequently enact measures and policies that are welcoming and favorable to migrants.
So why are the cops not allowed in there? That's fucking stupid. That is so fucking stupid. That's so retarded. People we don't know from countries that are shit, full of people that came here technically illegally, but technically legally at the same time because we f***ed everything up. We didn't. I didn't. These people, man. Send them all back. You f***ed it up and you can't have nothing. Send them all back. Call the migrants. They're all illegal. Every single one of them. Anybody across the border, out. I don't care. You can come back and try it legally next time.
Keep the president safe with all these checkpoints and stuff over here. They're not allowed to go into our shelters and patrol them looking for people who might be breaking the law. They're only allowed in if they've got a warrant for a specific individual. And what this does is this creates places that are more akin to like a minimum security prison because you've got gang members who are actually in charge in there, not law enforcement, not the city. And this is not hyperbole either. It's
oh, Fables, what do you care? They're not in your area. But bro, we're feeling it. We are feeling this economy, man. And it's like, oh, they only affect like 1%. But if 100 things are 1%, that's 100%.
out there for everyone who wants to see and look at it. New York's sanctuary status is actually aiding people who aren't here to help anybody but themselves in an illegal manner. And these are the results of bad policies, not because the asylum seekers themselves are bad, absolutely not, but because bad people are allowed to take advantage of laws that aren't protecting those who really need it. But sadly, the right to shelter system will probably remain in its current state, not actually.
Bro, I just got kicked out of my house and I'm basically living in a house that's fit for a third world country. Like, it's falling apart around me. The electrical box was shooting lightning the other day. But no, we can't get no help. No help at all. Thousands of dollars for each fucking illegal immigrant. Come on, man. And like, I don't care. I'm not asking for help. But like, don't leave me in the dirt and then fill my house with pigs.
Doing anything to help people, and some here will brag about it as a badge of pride because in their minds they're resisting tyranny and standing up for democracy against a president they dislike. And with 55% of the state voting the way that they have pretty much in every other presidential election, the politics of New Yorkers as a whole aren't realigning, even though some political analysts are predicting that there will be a movement towards the center from those who may have previously been associated with left-leaning policies.
See a change coming to how people run elections now going forward, even next November?
So, one of the interesting things is that I can use the New Jersey 7th congressional district as an example. The candidate, the Democrat, she was very, very progressive and very, very left. She tried to run to the middle and didn't get there fast enough, and she lost. So I would expect that Democrats are going to continue to try and run to the right. They're going to try and run to the middle, and they're going to...
Yeah, nothing that New York City does in the near future is going to change any of that. I don't think there's going to be much of a realignment here at all, and that's because many of our notable elected officials were able to win by landslide margins without changing anything. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she won 70-30, which means she was more popular in her own district than Vice President Harris was on a state level. And she's going to be under a lot of pressure because as Donald Trump starts his second presidential term and starts doing things, there won't be too many progressive voices of opposition if people start moderating like they very well may in other parts of the country. Many of our local
I don't think AOC is as crazy as people like Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. I don't think AOC is nearly as bad as Kamala. But AOC wasn't trying to be president.
Progressive leaders will be looked at as the voice of reason, and local progressives probably aren't going to change their positions on anything from immigration to inflation to jobs to taxes. Nope. And as far as local politics here goes, I don't think you're going to have this running to the center, so to speak. It might actually be the opposite. You may have people take more extreme positions than they did in the past because there is so much national progressive pressure.
I've already been seeing people say, we need to go more extreme. They're over on the far right. We need to be on the far left. Even though they're already on the far left, they just think that they're the ones who are moderate.
But it can only go to those who still hold views that are in direct opposition to what people in many parts of the country, including swing states, voted against. And there's going to be a lot of people in New York who see their beliefs as a counterbalance to what they think is a problem for America. And there's still a large portion of the traditional media world that is very upset with this Trump victory. Up until election night, he wasn't supposed to win this thing. He was actually down in polling. That slowly started to change after the votes came in and were counted, but 538, that's what the most reputable polling thing out there. Well, that guy, Nate Silver, he's thrown out his model saying that it doesn't accurately predict elections, and he was supposed to be one of the most accurate. But hopefully,
I'm just gonna say it again. Polls are fake. They've been fake the whole time.
something can be done to help the actual asylum seekers, because we've still got 65,000 of them living in shelters, and they're not being prepared in any way to reach for what New York said they were going to get when they...
Look at the state of the buildings. Look at the people in the streets. Look at the state of the sidewalks. Nothing's clean. I mean, there's not really any trash. There's obviously some trash. You can see some trash. But all these cones... This looks like a third world country. This looks like South America.
They moved in. Many of them are now so homeless that they're living in tents outside of the shelters where they moved into, and they have to do that because they have to go back to the shelters to get their mail, and the mail contains their asylum information. So we'll have to see what happens with that. We've still got a very big humanitarian crisis.
And if the police aren't allowed over there, people are gonna be getting robbed left and right, because that's where all of everybody are. And they've just got all a bunch of money
On our hands here in New York, and it's a problem that's probably not going to get fixed through political stuff, because that's what brought it here. It needs to start helping actual people. But what do you think about that? How would you go about fixing New York City's asylum crisis? And do you think that a lot of people...
We're gonna help all these people. We're gonna give them places to live. We're gonna give them food. We're gonna give them money. We're gonna give them housing. We're gonna give them jobs. And how are you gonna do all that? How are you gonna do that? You got all these systems in place, but nothing is working. So what was the point? You're just breaking the whole country, and then they're just gonna have to seek asylum in a different country. And then we're gonna have to seek asylum. Ridiculous.
People are going to be asked to leave the country. Do you think many asylum applications are going to get denied? Do you think New York is going to see more migration from folks who may have been told to leave the country and don't want to, and come here specifically because this is a sanctuary city? And how is that going to impact the legitimate goals of real asylum seekers?
Also, they say like, what is it, 200,000 migrants are there in New York? That's only the ones that they know about. I guarantee you double that. Double it. And that's how many people are not going to the shelters, not having anything to do with any of this system, and they're just mooching off of our society.
For the vast majority of these folks to begin with. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.
And the next video is now. But before that, I just lost everything. I lost my house. The house that I grew up in. If you want to help me out with any of that, because I am broke. I just moved into this place fit for a third world country. What these people in these videos should be living in. I have a PayPal down there in the description if you want to help me out. But migrants flooded to New York, seeking asylum, and then New York bussed them back to Texas.
New York City sending 4,500 migrants back to Texas, offering free one-way plane and bus tickets to other states. So Abbott sends migrants to New York.
I wanna go home, oh, oh, oh. I wanna go home.
New York, then New York spends all this money, millions, to send them back to Texas. The Big Apple has spent more than...
So Texas has sent around 30,000 people to New York on buses, and it looks like New York is now trying to send them back. In fact, asylum seekers here can not only get a free plane or bus ticket anywhere in the world, after their shelter stays expire, they're forced to reapply for housing at a location where these are handed out, revealing that even though New York is America's largest sanctuary city, our leaders don't want people staying here.
You don't say, because they're wasting all their money and the economy's breaking and it's too expensive for even rich people to live there now.
For some reason.
Governor Greg Abbott might have thought that he had the last laugh when he bussed tens of thousands of migrants from his state to New York City. But the Big Apple's mayor, Eric Adams, might have one-upped him. Adams is sending 4,500 arrivals back to the Lone Star State.
Adams is also returning migrants to Illinois, Florida, and Colorado. Abbott's office blasted Adams' move, saying, quote, hypocritical Mayor Adams said busing migrants is morally bankrupt.
I voted for Trump because of the economy.
Much like the trend nationally, many New York voters this year were driven by the economy and immigration, especially after Texas Governor Greg Abbott started busing migrants here 2 years ago.
Throughout his campaign, President-elect Donald Trump promised sweeping changes to what he painted as an out-of-control immigration system. And now, with his presidency secured, immigration advocates in New York City say they're bracing for what's to come.
Suddenly, it's not a sanctuary city all of a sudden, as they want to send the people back to Texas.
Yeah, they can only be a sanctuary city up to a certain point, because there is a breaking point. You can only fill the glass up so much, or it starts spilling over all over the table. And then ruins your table, and then you gotta clean up the floor. Then your dog drinks it and gets sick. And then the migrants eat the dog.
So, as New York continues to tout its sanctuary city status, it's secretly doing everything possible to help people leave. But what nobody's talking about is that this is just the latest example of how the asylum crisis has failed to bring about any meaningful improvements in the lives of asylum seekers. Because although over 200,000 have come to New York after our city offered them the American dream and a place to stay, the place to stay kicks them out after 1 or 2 months before most asylum seekers have had time to get jobs or plug into the local economy. Something we were all told wasn't going to happen here, as our leaders bragged about how our city had thousands of jobs just waiting to be filled by people getting off buses right here at the bus terminal. But
what about the thousands of jobs for the people that are already here?
if you visit any of the city's 200 asylum shelters, you'll see that asylum seekers are facing just as much poverty and joblessness here in America as they were in their home countries. And honestly, it's really sad to see thousands of able-bodied people who were lied to with no way to better their lives by working and living independently. And whether or not you are for or against the asylum crisis, it should be pretty obvious that in order to get so many people to...
You know why? You know why they're so poor? You know why nothing changed? Because they didn't come to an American culture. They brought their culture here, and their culture is a poor culture. The way they think is, it's like they have an impoverished mindset. I know this because I'm impoverished, and they are worse impoverished. I have a different mindset than somebody who works a 9-to-5. I have a different mindset than somebody who has $1 million in the bank. I've got a different mindset than a billionaire. Everybody at different financial levels have different mindsets. There's different cultures for this. And you have to bring them into a new culture to break that cycle.
To travel to a place which has no opportunity for them, you've got to tell them something that's not true. And observers say that's what's happened in New York as thousands of people were allowed to move into our shelter system.
I wonder why they were really brought here. I wonder. Was it to fill out votes? You think? People say that, no, illegals can't vote. They literally have tried to allow illegals to vote. They literally have tried it. I've showed it multiple times in my videos. I'm not going to look it up and explain it.
Living in a future that doesn't exist, only to be moved out of it a few months after they get here because the shelter system is full and new people who...
If you want to know, it's a quick Google search.
Believe there's a future here for them also need to stay there for 1 or 2 months as well. Which brings us to the real reason why New York has this bus program. Once people...
Just look up Orange County illegal immigrants voting. That's just one instance. There's thousands.
figure out that this is not some magical land of opportunity, they're faced with the reality that staying here isn't gonna help them. Something our leaders have known would happen all along, yet because of New York's proud progressive values, admitting our policies just waste money while failing to help people isn't on the table. And as you're about to see, while New York is quietly helping people leave, it's also doubling down on sanctuary city policies it already has proof aren't working. As a knee-jerk reaction to President Trump's re-election, which most people here thought wasn't gonna happen. So here we are at the Port Authority bus terminal where around 4,500 asylum seekers have gotten tickets back to Texas, some on the very buses they arrived on. And the irony here is that New York, the sanctuary city, is proving that it's not able to help people even though that's what it claims its purpose is. But what it can do...
Like, we all knew that it didn't have the resources to do that. It was an insane move. That's why everybody was mad about it. It's not that we don't want to take migrants, because I would love to take all of them, but we can't. We don't have the resources. We don't have the economy for it. Back in like the 1940s, we kind of did because of the war. Had bad economy, but we had a good economy to allow new workers in. But we didn't have an overpopulation problem in the cities as bad back then either. And for some reason, everybody keeps piling on to the cities. Cities are bad. They're the whole reason we're in this mess. Literally.
Is set people up for failure while still being able to claim, hey, we're progressive. We still have a right to shelter. We're still a sanctuary city. We're still able to help you. Which might help the non-asylum seekers that run this place feel good about themselves, but basically makes New York a sanctuary city in name only.
That's it. That's it. Like, they just want to feel good about themselves. At least I did this thing. At least I tried. At least I helped a little bit. We're from the government and we're here to help.
New York City sending 4,500 migrants back to Texas, offering free one-way plane and bus tickets to other states. So Abbott sends migrants to New York, then New York spends all this money, millions, to send them back to Texas. The Big Apple has spent...
Millions, she said. Millions! That was a B.
So it's important to understand the overarching principle behind both of these bus programs. Everybody that got on a bus from Texas to come to New York did so willingly, but they probably wouldn't have done so willingly had they known that things would turn out different and that they'd just be getting on another bus to go back to Texas willingly after a couple of months. And people are just trying to go to a place where they think they're going to have the best opportunity for themselves and their families. That's why they came to New York in the first place, and now that's why they're leaving New York in the second place. But that's not supposed to be how any of this worked out, because we've had over 200,000 people come to New York, which had its sanctuary city doors wide
200,000 that we know about.
Open and looked like it was going to be a place where people could start chasing after the American dream, which they were allowed to believe was going to happen when they got off buses and moved into our shelter system. But underneath the veneer of care that this city was putting forth was a big lie about opportunity.
How long's it been? How long's it been? 4 years? It's been 4 years. It's been 4 years. Nothing. Nothing to show for it.
That awaited people here, like jobs and a better future, that just...
You f***ed up. You f***ed up.
Just haven't existed ever, and now people have to leave and try to go find it somewhere else, and they're doing it with the city's help. But look at this, asylum seekers weren't the only ones who believed there was something good here waiting for them. As of October, there still should be 18,000 jobs out there for people who might live in shelters at the moment. But if those jobs are really out there and available to asylum seekers, it would be great for those companies or those businesses to start hiring, because we've got people living in tents outside of the shelters they've been evicted from because they've got nowhere else to go. And certainly a job from one of the 400 employers identified by the local government here would really help them pay rent and get off the...
Yeah, sure. If any of them actually qualified for the jobs. A lot of them have health issues. A lot of them are actively on drugs. Not saying even a good percentage of them, but it's still a lot. 1% of 200,000 people is a lot of fucking people still. They ain't got no transportation. A lot of them ain't got no time because they're having to deal with the government. A lot of them just don't have any skills. Most of them don't have any skills. That's the whole reason they're here. It's the whole reason they're poor is because they don't have any skills. They got poor people skills, but poor people skills don't mean anything at a factory. Like, what's chopping wood gonna do for a factory? I mean, you can go work at a lumber yard, but there's only so many lumber yards.
Streets, and certainly a job that someone could work at and provide for themselves would negate the ticket program New York City has to help people get on buses and leave town. Unless, of course, the job market here isn't as rosy as people are being told it is. And
what's a traffic cone for? What's a traffic cone gonna do? Is that to like keep people on each side of the traffic?
These jobs either aren't available or the positions have already been filled. And if the job market were as great for asylum seekers as we're being told, we probably wouldn't see the effects of mass unemployment at every single shelter in town, which proves that there
and also mass employment across the United States of American citizens.
is an opportunity here for them, and they were told that there was.
And it goes back to politics again. Now New York has seen that they can't handle the situation because not only just the amount of people, but also economically as well. So I could.
In my town, where I live right now, we still have all of the same jobs that we've had since I've been a kid. Walmart left. We don't got a Walmart anymore. 3,000 people in my town. 10,000 people town next to us. 3,000. So it's a very small place. But we used to be able to live comfortably with the jobs here. $12 an hour, that was a killing, man. When I turned 18, I was making $12 an hour. I was pulling $600 a week, which is a crazy amount back then for where I live. That was like nice house, nice car kind of deal. Because rent for a nice house around here right now is going for like $1,300. Back then, it was going for $600, $700, $800 for rent. Not buying a house. Still incredibly cheap back then compared to now. Ridiculous. I can't even find a job right now because any job that I would get here where I live is not worth it. I might as well just keep doing odd jobs and internet stuff because I make the same.
Tell you for a fact that in Texas, we're going to continue busing them to these sanctuary cities because, again, these are sanctuary cities. They did welcome immigrants from day one. So
all of this opportunity that people were led to believe was here turned out to be a big lie, and this is evident in the city's own reporting. Remember, over 200,000 asylum seekers have come here. We've got tens of thousands of jobs available, but only 2,000 people, according to this article, have actually been connected with employment. And although some asylum seekers have to wait a month and others have to wait 6 months to get work authorization,
how are they going to vet all these people? Like, how they know they're not criminals? Some of them, they do know that they're criminals, so they can't hire them. I bet a lot of them are.
This crisis is 2 years old at this point, and only 2,000 people have been connected with jobs. That's not a system that's working out in anybody's favor. And if someone moves into one of our asylum shelters and
I bet maybe 10%, because 10% is the number for every population, in my opinion. 10% is the number for how many actually good, hardworking people there are in any given population. And it really sucks that the 90% ruin it for the 10%. The many always ruin it for the few. Every time.
they can only stay for 1 or 2 months, but they're unable to get a job and unable to start providing for themselves, and then they have to move out. What other option do they have other than to live in a tent outside of that shelter, as some people are doing, or to get on a bus and try to make it somewhere else? Well, obviously, most people are leaving, and it looks like 47,000 one-way tickets have been purchased in total since this program started. And 40,000 one-way tickets means that 22% of the 212,000 asylum seekers who've come here have been paid to leave in some capacity. And what that means is the asylum programs we have to care for people in New York aren't as helpful as we may have thought.
Political strategists say, much like the trend nationally, many New York voters this year were driven by the economy and immigration, especially after Texas Governor.
Are you saying that Republicans were right and Democrats were wrong? Again? This one was kind of obvious, though. This one was an obvious one. And the rich Democrats, they don't really care that much. They do now because they didn't think that it would actually affect us this much. But it wasn't affecting them at first because they don't live where the migrants are.
Greg Abbott started busing migrants here 2 years ago.
If you have Democrats in charge of the state, Democrats in charge of the city, and Democrats in charge of the country, if you're not happy, you kind of go to the Republican.
Now, as you're about to see, our progressive leaders, they're not paying attention to how ineffective these policies are, and they're actually about to double down on them, in spite of the fact that they aren't working, and in spite of the fact that voters, in greater numbers than ever before, are voicing their opposition to them. And even though many people are starting to figure out that the asylum crisis isn't helping anybody, our leaders aren't of that mindset. Because here in New York, you've got an electorate that does not like Donald Trump. Remember, he lost this state, and what that means is the politicians that we have here, it's going to be their mandate to resist whatever his plans are for New York City and for immigration as a whole for this country. And although this
New York's fucked. Like, I don't think there's any coming back for New York. Honestly, I think a lot of areas that were once good in the United States are never going to be good, or at least aren't going to be good for a very long time again. Some places that haven't been good are going to be good now. So, like, it's a trade-off. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully it's a trade-off. Hopefully we're not trading all the good for a bunch of bad and good for rich people.
might not be true of every district in New York State, some of which recently voted red for the first time. In New York City itself, especially places like Brooklyn that voted 80% in favor of Vice President Harris, the mandate still holds. But as you're about to see, when progressive policies aren't working, admitting that they don't work isn't part of the equation. Instead, the reason they failed is because they weren't progressive enough,
or they're gonna blame it on Republicans pushing back too hard, or the rhetoric, or this street's too dangerous.
We didn't have enough of them, or we ran out of money. Which is why New York City is about to do more of the things that aren't helping asylum seekers at all, but are in fact making their lives even tougher. So, the longer the asylum crisis continues, the more apparent it becomes that progressive sanctuary cities do absolutely nothing to help those who want to become law-abiding permanent residents. Yet after the election, New York City's leaders have already announced their plans to fight tooth and nail against every immigration policy President Trump tries to enact.
Yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. It ain't gonna work out. Eventually, they're gonna be forced to have to accept it because they're gonna have no other option. Because everything's going to be on fire.
Once he takes office, which means New York is going to become even more of a sanctuary city than it is right now.
President-elect Donald Trump promised sweeping changes to what he painted as an out-of-control immigration system. And now, with his presidency secured, immigration advocates in New York City say they're bracing for what's to come.
We're going to fight it. We're as prepared, if not more prepared than the first time around. We fought him not just in the streets.
I'm sorry, I don't want to single out this one particular person, but what is this idea? What are people fighting against? What does New York City think it can do to control U.S. immigration policy? If anything, the asylum crisis proves that New York has no control over federal immigration policy. Because for the last 2 years, the asylum crisis has absolutely exploded here. And it's not benefiting the lives of people who fled poverty thinking they'd come here and experience heaven on earth.
And also, it's making the people who were already in poverty, that were already here, they're making their lives worse. Using resources on the people that shouldn't be here.
That has not happened at all. But what has happened is the prolonging of poverty, the prolonging of suffering and joblessness. And this all happened before Trump was even president and didn't look like he had a chance to ever get back in the White House. And if anything, the last...
What happened to the New York that I knew when I was a kid? Like, Hey Arnold, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Spider-Man. I don't know, what else cartoons from the 90s and 2000s took place in New York? There were a lot. And New York seemed like a magical place to me back then. It ain't anymore.
2 years have been a great opportunity for sanctuary cities in this country to prove how great they are and how much they...
Sesame Street
can help people, but they haven't proved that. But they have proved they can harbor dangerous gang members and wanted fugitives from federal immigration authorities who are trying to keep people safe. We'll get to that too, but people shouldn't need free tickets to get on a bus like this if there's something here that benefits them. With this crisis not directly benefiting the very people it's named after, you've got to wonder who's actually in favor of this. Obviously, it's politicians that now see themselves as the resistance to a president that hasn't even taken office yet. It benefits the bus companies, who now get to make more money transporting some of the very same people back to Texas, where they got paid to bring them here. And sadly, it also benefits people who aren't allowed to legally reside in the country and are on some sort of federal wanted list.
Don't forget, it benefits the people that are bringing them over here. It benefits the people who are working for the companies that are helping, because that gives them a 9-to-5 and it's easy.
And those people are not the asylum seekers. Asylum seekers, they can reside anywhere in the country they want because they're here while they wait for a court date in the future. If you don't have an asylum court date, or if you have been ordered to leave the country, you've only got one choice, and that's to come to a sanctuary city. And who does that? Well, we know the gang members are doing it. They've been caught living in some of our shelters right here in New York, using them as a base to commit crime all over our city. Yet because we're a sanctuary city, there's nothing that can be done to remove the criminal element from places that are supposed to help people. And this small number of people is doing great damage.
And they're definitely using that against them. 100%. They know all of the rules. They know the rules better than those who wrote them. Because the people who wrote them, they wrote them and never looked at them again. The people who are trying to skirt the rules, trying to get around the rules, they study them. They find the loopholes
to our city, and they're causing great harm to asylum seekers who they are here to exploit. And sanctuary city status allows these folks to hide here while living relatively normal lives compared to being fugitives in other parts of the country. Here, your immigration status doesn't matter. And the scary thing about this gang is the way that they operate is through human exploitation. And how is allowing them to live in shelters where you have families and little kids who are trying to start a new life a good idea for anybody? It's not. Yet by promising to resist and fight against Trump by putting forth policies that ultimately only benefit criminals, our leaders aren't creating a safe space for immigrants in any way, but they are creating a safe space for some very unsafe people.
Trump has promised mass deportations using the National Guard to round up immigrants and bringing back policies he put in place during his first term. Mayor Eric Adams has repeatedly pressed the current administration for federal assistance as the city's resources struggled to keep up with the wave of asylum seekers arriving in the city.
So this whole asylum crisis, it's a manufactured mess. And what does the city do? Well, they allow the mess to continue, and then they beg the federal government for money to solve it. Now, Mayor Adams is bound by the law. He has...
And that means more money gets exchanged through more pockets, or between more pockets. More people make more money because they find out, oh, hey, the government's handing out free money. Come get your pay. Come get your payout. All you got to do is come help us break everything that these people built before us. Because we don't like their stuff. Their stuff was racist.
To carry out right to shelter whether he likes it or not, and to do it he's gonna need massive amounts of money, and the hope when this whole crisis started is that that money would come from the federal government, but it never did. But even though New York didn't receive the massive amounts of money needed to house the entire world, which is what's gonna happen when you have sanctuary city status and a right to shelter, they still had to go through with it, which did keep people, especially families with little kids, from having to live on the streets. Yes, right to shelter did accomplish that, and nobody wants to see families on
Roosevelt Hotel. Isn't that like a historical place?
The streets. But because we're not a law and order state, and because we're a sanctuary city, having families live in a shelter system that is also populated with gang members who are trying to recruit new members and find people who they can exploit, that's not a good situation either. And that's the situation we're now dealing with, and that we're now saying we're going to do everything in our power here in New York to maintain. And what's crazy is that New York City's shelters wouldn't be like this if we were not a sanctuary city. If we had a right to shelter and we still housed asylum seekers, the situation in those shelters would look very different if police were actually allowed.
How can you be a sanctuary city and a tourist destination at the same time? You can't. You can't. And the more you lose the tourists, the more you lose the money. That's basically what New York's economy was all about in the early 2000s. That, and that's where a lot of money exchanged hands, like World Trade Center and stuff like that.
out inside, but they're not allowed in. Police can't patrol these places, but the gang members who live in them can, and they are. And these gangs are fueled by two things, which the asylum crisis here in its current state gives them: lawlessness and poverty. They've been exploiting the poor in their own countries, which is why those folks fled. And now those folks have to flee again, many of them on the very same buses that brought them here. This system is not working, yet it's going to continue in the future as a symbol of resistance and as a symbol of New York City's
GTA 4 was supposed to be like a parody of New York. It was supposed to be worse than New York because it's a ridiculous video game version of New York. And now, real life New York is worse than that New York.
Progressive values. Is that what's going on here? Is that why this system that's not helping anybody is going to continue? Or is there another reason? Do you think that this is part of the resistance against an incoming president who says he wants to make sweeping changes to U.S. immigration law? Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video.
Oh boy, you think New York's going to be having some changes with their immigration? With these illegal immigrants? I think they're going to see some changes. But I think these changes are just going to make things worse. They're going to try and alleviate the issues. I don't think busing people out is going to even help at this point. I think it's too broken. I think they fucked up. I think we literally have to deport them. We have to get them out of the country. And that sucks, man, because a lot of these people are actually decent people. Even the people who I refer to as criminals. Because technically, I am a criminal too. In the eyes of the government, even though I and most people would think that I've never done anything actually wrong, to the extent that would require me to go to jail, like I did. Anarchy!